Hello, all. Thanks for tuning in. And uh, we are beginning a series here on evolutionary astrology. And evolutionary astrology is something that I've been exposed to very recently due to the Facebook group EA Zoom meetings. And I have with me Steve Wolfson, whom I got to know through the Facebook group EA Zoom meetings. And Steve made a very wonderful presentation there, and I didn't want to miss the opportunity to just get in touch with him. And it was a very profound experience, that presentation. Thank you so much, Steve, and thanks for joining.
You're welcome.
So, evolutionary astrology, I think you can just give a little bit of background to what evolutionary astrology actually is, and then we can move on to our usual schedule.
Well, the evolutionary astrology that I do is a system that was put together by Jeffrey Wolf Green over a period of years. He basically feels that he was intuitively guided into the work and into the orientation. He himself never didn't anticipate being an astrologer. In fact, I remember him saying he used to hate astrology, actually, and because he didn't feel you needed it, that you didn't need something external. And he kind of had a somewhat mystical experience where he was informed that his life work was to be an astrologer, and he he was not happy about this. It was kind of like, at any rate, because of his level of spiritual awareness, living awareness of the human soul, the astrology came together for him from the perspective of the soul. This was in the 1980s, where Pluto had been discovered. I believe the planet was discovered in 1930, and prior to that, people didn't have astrologers didn't have a particularly clear idea of what is Pluto, what does it mean, what's it about. There had been some work done on it, but he basically, in a series of dreams, I think it started in dreams, got all these insights into what Pluto is about. And he started practicing this astrology and doing umpteen numbers of charts. And he was well known up in Seattle. He was on the radio once a week doing live readings. And eventually he wrote a book. It became a very successful book called Evolutionary Astrology, Pluto, the Soul's Journey, Evolutionary Astrology. And in this he outlined the essence of evolutionary astrology and the archetypes and correlations of Pluto in the 12 signs/houses. And the Pluto, what he called the Pluto signature. I got involved in this about 2002. I was very drawn to it. It matched where I was at in my own life and growth and spiritual unfolding. And without particularly knowing what I was doing, I kind of had an innate, inherent insight into what it was about, even though I didn't have all of the details. I started teaching it very early on, or discussing it, I would say. Excuse me. And I started doing readings, and as I have said, I am a counselor type of person. It's just my orientation to want to assist people with issues that are going on in their life and their confusion, because I've been through a lot of my own, and I found that I just am naturally acclimated to being able to validate what people are going through and having insight for them. So it kind of married together, and I did this work for about 12 years. And then my life started changing, but that's all I need to say about it right now. So I want to talk about the essence of evolutionary astrology begins with Pluto. Pluto correlates to the human soul. So what we have in all the religions of the world, whatever sense there is of a soul, particularly in Indian philosophy and spirituality, that we have a series of lives, that we are a soul, that we have a series of lives that are evolving, that there is this concept called karma, and that we are somewhere in this process of a life within a much longer journey through the soul. So in a country like the United States and Western countries, we don't, now it's becoming more here, but not that long ago, we had no concept of reincarnation or past lives or future lives. It was kind of like that. That's crazy stuff. Part of the waking up that's been going on over the last 50 years or so is this is becoming more and more accepted. Like, yeah, this is what's going on. Evolutionary astrology came along at a time when this is being accepted. So the gist of Pluto is that, well, the basic nature of life is that we are continually evolving. We are souls, and we have a cosmic force, source, creation, whatever, that split itself into a zillion small pieces and essentially breathe life into all of them so that each is on its own journey. And this is the unfolding of the soul. And part of the brilliance of an idea of a human life and a personality is to coming in and completely forgetting all of this, sort of being hypnotized and living in a state of, here I am, and I was born and I was a little baby, and someday I'm going to get old, and what's it all about, and what am I doing here? And in the West, it's like, how much fun can I have, and how soon can I start having it? And about that pain and about those other things, push them away. We don't want that. So evolutionary astrology starts with the premise that there is a reason, a cause, a purpose, a mission, a direction to any one of us being here in a body. And we are influenced by what we have been before, and we're going to a future where we will be more than we are now. And the soul creates human forms, lifetimes, a body, a personality, as part of its unfolding journey. So in evolutionary astrology, Pluto, the soul, is the starting point. Because everything that's in a chart, Pluto is the cause of. Therefore, we interpret a chart in correlation to what is Pluto doing in that chart. And this goes by house and by sign. So with Pluto, because it has a approximately 250-year orbit, it's in a sign for a long time. So we have Pluto generations, meaning I'm in the Pluto and Leo generation, what we call here the baby boomers. So I always found this interesting because in the 1970s, when we were coming of age, they started calling this generation the me generation. So then I become an astrologer in Pluto. It's Pluto and Leo, the me generation. But not really in a bad way, but in a way of wanting to creatively self-express, which is what we would look as the principle of Leo. At any rate, we have Pluto in Virgo, Pluto in Libra, Pluto in Scorpio. And so there's a generational imprint. And this is one reason why generations don't necessarily see eye to eye, because at the soul level, they're here for different reasons. Those reasons are based on the evolution of the planet itself. The planet itself is evolving, not just the individual humans. Now we have, another thing to point out, as in evolutionary astrology, as Jeffrey taught it, we don't make distinctions between house and sign and planet. In other words, the 8th house, Pluto, and Scorpio, they're all the same to us. They're different manifestations of the same principles, the same archetype. So as part of the signature, if somebody has 4 planets in Scorpio scattered around, say, the 2nd and 3rd house, that's the same thing as having 4 planets in the 8th, I said 2nd and 3rd house. So let's just say in the 8th house, they have 4 planets in Taurus and Gemini. That's the same signature. We don't give an indication to the house that the house means this and the sign means that. It's kind of like different ways of stating the same message. Now, where was I? So the evolutionary signature consists of the Pluto by house and sign, the South Node by house and sign. The reason for the node is the node represents, or we can say, let's call it the moon. In EA, we look at the moon as the personality, or Cancer, moon, 4th house, as the personality, not the sun, but the moon. Our emotional nature, our emotional basis. And so this is the persona that the soul has created for the current lifetime. The South Node represents the past personas that the soul has created for past lifetimes. So basically, the principle is that within the soul, as well as the personality, we feel safe and secure with what is known and familiar. So if I have been, let's say that I'm a person that has a South Node in Cancer, it's just a brief piece of the South Node in Cancer and a couple planets in the 4th house. I'm going to have a certain comfort or familiarity with feeling, with emotion. That's going to be a place I resonate with. If I don't have indications of, say, a strong mental component, not a lot of air signs and so forth, I may be a little uncomfortable with the mental. I may gravitate towards the emotional. That's a good thing. But like all things, we are continually being called by life to expand ourselves. So the journey of evolution is away from what is known and familiar and into specific areas that may feel uncomfortable, unsafe, because we don't feel at home there. They're not what we know. So the signature is the past, which is what we know, is Pluto by house and sign, South Node by house and sign, and the ruler of the South Node by house and sign. So if I have a Cancer South Node, the ruler is Moon. So wherever the Moon is showing up and the sign it's in is how that South Node has been showing up. if I had a Gemini south node, it would be Mercury, not Moon, by house and sign. And the best way I have found to formulate this is the soul itself doesn't move in the physical realm. It needs a vehicle, a person. So the soul has its own growth and orientation, that's Pluto. It has desires and intents relative to its own orientation. It actualizes those through a personality, south node. The south node actualizes its nature, its past, through its ruler. So everything is acting on something else. We then have the polarity of that, those 3 points, the Pluto south node, the ruler of the south node. It's called the Pluto signature. That's the way it's referred to. There's also a polarity of this. As astrologers, we're familiar with the north node, with the south node being our past personalities, and the north node, the direction that our personality nature is intending to evolve. We also have a Pluto polarity point, which is essentially, it's not a north node, but it's essentially where Pluto is evolving towards, which is 180 degrees from where Pluto is located. And we have then the north node. So the Pluto polarity point actualizes through the north node actualizes through its ruler. These combinations are the signature, and they're the baseline in the chart. So in EA, or this EA, everything else in the chart we interpret in correlation with the basic underlying signature. In other words, we don't look at any part of the chart and pick it out on its own. People, let's say non-astrologers will tend to go, well, I have Jupiter in, Sagittarius in the 6th house. What does that mean? And they have books telling you what that means. But EA would look at this as those interpretations are being done without a context. The context is the Pluto signature, the evolutionary signature. Through understanding the evolutionary signature, I can then interpret Jupiter in the 6th house, whatever I just said, Chiron in Aquarius, whatever, within the context of why it's in the signature. Because the reason somebody might have, 2 people could have Jupiter in Sag in the 3rd house, but they could have very different reasons for having it there. There's not a generic answer. In fact, a good analogy would be, it's like analyzing the liver from 15 different people. You can't pick out the liver and just look at the liver and understand what's going on in the person, because it's a system and the liver is just part of it. Similarly, any of the planets or placements we have are just part of what's going on. In order to really be able to interpret what's going on, we need to see the overall signature of why the person is constructed this way. So that's the basis of Jeffrey Wolf Green's Evolutionary Astrology.
Okay. So I think I just also want to get into a little bit of the philosophical side of evolutionary astrology. So evolutionary astrology preaches or goes with free will, right? It doesn't entirely support the concept of fate. Even though fate. So
you're saying free will.
Yeah, it's free will. So even though evolutionary astrology takes karma and reincarnation into consideration, evolutionary astrology thinks that man can actually make or be an architect of his own life uh, through free will. So things are not entirely bound by fate, or is there a specific place where things are actually fated and free will doesn't really work? So how does evolutionary astrology see that?
You're basically correct with that. It states that we have free will or choice. And that's where it comes, the part that I spoke about we gravitate towards what feels most familiar because we feel safe there. That's where this ties in. And because we call it EA, just for short, Evolutionary Astrology,
Sure.
EA.
Sure.
So EA basically says, well, when I get tired enough of, being stuck in a rut and going around and around, I can change things when I want to by applying myself. And these are the parts that I'm developing a bit of a different take on that. I'll put it that way. This is Steve talking, not Jeffrey Wolf Green, Evolutionary Astrology. But because I feel that more and more, I feel that we come in with a soul plan, and that plan is going to play out. No, I don't mean by that we're somehow victims of fate, and it's not worth doing anything, because I feel, a good example, perhaps, or metaphor is, if I have a role in a movie, well, the script already exists. But I don't get to sit there saying, well, I don't need to play my part because it doesn't make any difference anyway. In other words, the script exists for me to inhabit that script, to bring it to life. And in particular, what I'm seeing is that where humans do have free will is certain things are going to happen. And where I have choice is, how am I going to respond to the things that happen? We're not going to like everything that happens. We're not supposed to like everything that happens. It starts getting philosophical at this point, Mike.
Yeah, I think we should just go ahead and explore what it is, so that it will set up a good establishment in terms of what we are going to do in our future videos. So I thought we should also explore the philosophical side of EA.
Okay, well, this is the philosophical side of Steve.
Because, whatever it is, because let it be a philosophical side of Steve, because at the end of the day, every astrologer gives their own opinion of what a philosophy about astrology actually is. So you gave a very nice introduction to Hellenistic astrology, evolutionary astrology, for the first 15 minutes or so. And I really want to explore the philosophical side in terms of what you are speaking now. And I also want to hear what you think, or what you make out of karma and reincarnation as separate concepts. Because I think this kind of ties in as a circle with the actual theory of EA.
Yeah. Okay, good. So where I've come to is, let me say where I started first, because then it helps understand where I've come to. So I find pretty much all humans I've interacted with have been affected by, in the belief systems, the ways of looking at life of pretty much every person I've encountered are the ways that they learned predominantly as a child, by the way they were raised, by the way their parents were raised, who are the parents are the way they are because of the way their parents are raised, and this goes back a long way.
So there is a pattern.
And so we have a lot of fears, we have a lot of self-doubts, we have a lot of anxiety, we have a lot of uncertainty. We have learned this, and many of us have experienced very traumatic events in our life that have left their imprint, their mark on us. And they have left many of us feeling, in some ways, I'm on my own. I don't know if life really cares so much about me. Or what I've noticed, like in cultures like India, where reincarnation is an accepted thing, well, my life must be the way it is because I did a lot of really bad things. And so I'm getting the karma of a lot of difficult situations because I was bad. And the imprint there is, I'm bad, I'm bad, I'm bad. And so while we don't have as much of that in the West, we have it in different ways. It's like, over here, it's like, well, you were born in sin. And so you're starting, in other words, you're starting out with 2 strikes against you. And so this is what I am coming to, I and many other people are coming to see there's something wrong with the model. In other words, it's a way of looking at the events that have occurred in my life. I can put on a filter that sees from that perspective, and that's exactly what I will see. That life is hard, that I'm on my own, that a lot of people are out to get me, that not many people really are on my side or assisting me. And especially in the West, that's a pretty common experience. And I'm just, what I'm coming to is that's a way I've learned to look at things, but there's a completely other way that I can learn to look at things, have been learning to look at things, which is everything that has happened in my life, and some of them have been very painful, has actually been for my soul unfolding. Not as a punishment, not because I was bad, but just as a parent, a father, a mother, especially a mother, at times has to have their children do things that they're not going to like. Because that's part of being a good mother. Not to punish the child, but there's things that the child is scared to do, and yet they need to do that in order to unfold into an adult. And they need to have certain patterns in place. And the mother can support the child and care for the child, and the mother can feel sad that the child is having to have a painful experience, but she knows that the child needs that experience. And I feel more and more that's kind of the way that life works. The things that have occurred to us that have been very difficult, losing a parent early on, losing a child, having a painful relationship or marriage, having a parent or very abusive person in a home. Well, it's easy to see why one might conclude, well, these things are happening. Why else would this be happening except I'm being punished for something? I don't feel like I did anything, so it must be coming from something I did somewhere, because why else are these things happening? But from the broader perspective of there's a couple of perspectives. One is that in the broader perspective of what I need to learn as a soul, somehow in ways I can't yet understand, these are good things. My experience with Pluto began in the 1990s when I had Pluto over my ascendant, and I didn't know what that meant at the time, and it was really, really hard. I had some times during that period when I just, I would have been okay if I died. It was painful. And lo and behold, 5 years later, I had changed so much. I sat there one day saying, I can't believe this, but I feel grateful that I had to go through those experiences, because I wouldn't be here now where I am if I hadn't gone through those experiences. There's no way that would have happened. And I learned from that, this is kind of the essence of Pluto, and that nothing that we go through is a punishment.
It's an evolution.
The concept, yes, it's an evolution. And the concept of karma, which I think karma exists, is true, except we put judgments on what we call good and what we call bad karma. And none of it is punishing us. These are just experiences that we need that are most efficient. And I don't like efficient because it sounds very cold, but they're actually the most loving and speedy ways for us to have the experiences we need to help us understand what we need to understand. I have experienced that the universe is very, very, very loving. And that even when I was in the most difficult circumstance, and I didn't feel it, but the universe was actually holding me in its arms in love as I was going through difficult times, just like a caring mother might hold their child through a time that was difficult, knowing they just had to get through that experience. So my perspective at this point is everything that happens to us is for our benefit. When we're continually being growth, evolution is bringing us from what we know and what feels familiar and comfortable out into things that are not comfortable and don't feel familiar. And therefore, we may feel fear about it. We may not want to go through it. But one of the reasons that we're moved from what we know into what we don't know, because if everything in our life is to help us grow, at a certain point, we've learned the lessons that were associated with what we were doing. Otherwise we would go to school, we'd go in the third grade, and we just want to stay in the third grade for 20 years because it's familiar. But at a certain point, it gets boring. Like, I've already done this. I can tell you the very words the teacher's going to say on this day, having done it 10 times. And our souls, at least, we get this boredom, and we're wired inside with this impulse that wants to keep moving forward. And that unfolds and that plays out. So to me, the deeper levels of evolutionary astrology are to map out in a chart the journey that soul is on for that lifetime, and also the indications of where it has been before. So EA is definitely about reincarnation. I think I find traces in there, a little bit of traces of kind of judgment in certain ways. Like there are certain concepts in EA that point to things that have been going on for a series of lifetimes, and there's been a little bit like, yeah, well, you're going to get your butt kicked about that because you haven't been able to do it yourself. And I just don't look at it that way anymore. I more and more feel like everyone has been doing the best they can forever. Even people that have done really crappy things that they may no longer feel good about. They had to do them. They had to do them. They don't have to like it. They don't have to like it. But it's a matter of accepting, okay, I have done this. I wouldn't do it again. That's one of the healthiest statements I've heard. I learned from this. I'm not going to do that again. And oftentimes, it leads to a desire within the person to help other people that might be struggling with similar things, because they have walked that path, they understand that path, they understand what's going on inside the person. And part of their feeling like they want to make up for what they've done is to try to help other people.
Okay.
So this is some of the value that I find from this approach. Having compassion for where people are.
I think that was a wonderful explanation. So from EA point of view, everything that happens in a person's life is a process of evolution. So each and every experience is leading a human a step higher in the evolutionary process of
Yes.
Of his actual eternal being itself. Not just the physical being, but the eternal being or the soul.
Yes.
So yeah, okay, that's great. I think that was a very good philosophical establishment that we have had for EA. So which probably we did not intend in the beginning of this session, and we had something else. But I think this has given a very wonderful establishment and introduction to our series of videos that we are going to do in future. So do you have any final thoughts? I think it's pretty much towards the end of the session for the introduction.
Yes. I actually think that I feel good about how we've covered this, and I like your questions and the direction that we're moving. So we are planning to do a series of talks about the different planets / signs and what they mean in evolutionary astrology.
Okay. So that's great. Thank you so much, Steve, for joining, and it was very profound to me as it was in the EA Zoom meeting. So I'm looking forward to the further sessions that we are going to do, and I think it's done for now. And bye bye.
Bye, Aswin.